My name is Elena Reyes. I was 31 years old when my mother placed a manila envelope on the kitchen island, like she was serving dessert, and said, "We need to talk about what you owe this family." It was Thanksgiving morning. The turkey wasn't even in the oven yet. My stepfather stood behind her with his arms folded, wearing that look he always wore when he wanted you to know a decision had already been made, and your opinion was a formality. My younger brother Diego sat on the bar stool, scrolling his phone, smirking like someone who already knew the punchline to a joke I hadn't heard yet. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed contract, 6 pages, bound with a black clip. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Family Contribution Agreement." Below that was my name, my social security number, and a monthly payment schedule. $800 a month, retroactive to January. According to their math, I already owed $4,800 in missed contributions, and the next payment was due December 1st. I flipped to the last page and felt my stomach drop. There was a signature line at the bottom, and someone had already signed it. My name, in cursive, in ink, I had never touched. "Who signed this?" I asked. My mother didn't blink. "You did. Back in March. Don't you remember?" I stared at her. I remembered March. In March, I had been recovering from a divorce, sleeping on an air mattress in my cousin's living room and working double shifts as a staff accountant at a logistics firm downtown, just to rebuild what my ex-husband had drained from our joint account during the separation. I had not signed anything. I had barely been functioning. "I didn't sign this," I said. My stepfather cleared his throat. "Elena, your mother and I have carried this household for years. Diego is still getting on his feet. You're the one with the degree, the salary, the career. It's time you contributed like an adult." Diego didn't even look up from his phone. "She acts like $800 a month is a lot. My buddy pays twice that for a studio in Austin." "Your buddy," I said, "doesn't live rent-free in his parents' house driving a car they bought him." Diego's smirk vanished for half a second, then came back wider. "At least I didn't marry a guy who cleaned out the bank account and left me sleeping on a pool float." My mother actually laughed. Not loud, not cruel on the surface, but enough for me to understand that whatever was happening at this island wasn't a negotiation, it was a sentencing. Have you ever sat across from the people who raised you and realized that the warmth you remembered from childhood had been replaced by something transactional? Before I tell you what I found hidden in that contract, and what it cost my mother when I discovered it, tell me what time it is for you right now, and where are you watching from? I want to see how far this story reaches. I placed the contract back on the island, and looked at my mother for a long time. She held my gaze the way she always did when she was lying, which was steady, practiced, almost compassionate, like she had rehearsed sincerity in a mirror. "I'm not paying this," I said. My stepfather took a step forward. "Then we need to have a different conversation about your living situation." That was almost funny. My living situation was a 1-bedroom apartment 14 miles away that I paid for with my own money. I hadn't lived under their roof in over a year. The only reason I was standing in that kitchen was because my mother had called me 3 days earlier crying and saying she missed me, that Thanksgiving wouldn't be the same without her daughter, that family was all that mattered. Now I understood. She hadn't missed me. She'd needed me in the room for the presentation. I picked up my bag from the counter and walked toward the front door. "You're leaving?" my mother said, her voice cracking on cue. "On Thanksgiving?" "You turned Thanksgiving into a billing meeting," I said, "so yes." Diego called after me, dramatic as always. I didn't answer him. I got in my car and sat in the driveway for 5 minutes with the engine running, reading the contract again, under the dome light. That's when I noticed something on page 4 that I had skimmed past the first time. A clause buried in dense language, referencing a home equity line of credit. The clause stated that the undersigned, meaning me, agreed to serve as co-guarantor on a HELOC taken against the property at my mother's address. My forged signature wasn't just on a fake family agreement, it was on a loan application. I drove straight to my apartment, locked the door, and called the one person I trusted to be honest when honesty wasn't comfortable. Priya Chandran had been my closest friend since our first week at Ohio State. She was a paralegal at a mid-size firm in Columbus, and had the kind of mind that could untangle a lie the way a surgeon removes shrapnel, carefully, completely, and without flinching. I told her everything. She was quiet for about 10 seconds, which for Priya meant she was furious. "Elena," she said, "if your signature is on a loan document you never signed, that's not a family contribution agreement. That's forgery. And if they used it to secure a line of credit, that's fraud." "It's my mother," I said. "It's a felony," she said. "How much is the HELOC?" "I don't know yet." "Find out. Pull your credit report tonight. If there's a line of credit attached to your name that you didn't authorize, we need to know the balance and the lender." I ran my credit report at 11 that night, sitting cross-legged on my bed with a cup of coffee going cold on the nightstand. There it was. A home equity line of credit, opened in March, listed under my mother's address with me as co-borrower. The original amount was $40,000. The current balance was $36,400. They had already spent most of it. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. My mother had forged my signature, opened a line of credit in both our names, drawn nearly $40,000, and then invited me to Thanksgiving dinner to present a fake payment plan that would make me fund repayment on debt I never agreed to. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something harder had already taken the place where tears usually lived. When you discover that the person who taught you to write your name used it to write debt into your future, the grief doesn't come right away. First comes the math. Priya came over the next morning with a legal pad and her laptop. We spent 4 hours building a timeline. She showed me how to request the original loan documents from the lender. She explained that if the signature didn't match verified samples, I could file a dispute, escalate to fraud, and potentially have the entire line of credit voided as unauthorized. "But you need to decide something first," she said. "What? Do you want to handle this quietly, or do you want to protect yourself legally regardless of what happens to your mother?" I looked at the credit report on my screen. $36,000 of debt I never asked for, signed for, or spent. "I want the truth on paper," I said. "Whatever comes after that is their problem." For 2 weeks, I gathered everything. Bank records, copies of my actual signature from tax returns, apartment leases, and employment documents. I requested the original HELOC application from the lender, and when it arrived, I compared the signature to my real one. It wasn't even close. Whoever had forged it, my mother or my stepfather, had used a version of my name I hadn't written since high school. The capital E was rounded, where mine had been angular for years. The Y at the end looped left. Mine always looped right. A professional handwriting comparison would confirm what was already obvious. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had been sloppy about it. During those 2 weeks, my family acted like nothing had happened. My mother texted me a photo of leftover pie and wrote "saved you a slice," as if Thanksgiving had ended with hugs instead of fraud. Diego sent a meme about siblings arguing over holidays. My stepfather sent nothing, which somehow felt more honest. I didn't respond to any of them. I was building something, and I wanted it finished before they knew it existed. On the 15th day, Priya and I sat down with a consumer protection attorney named Daniel Okafor. He was calm, precise, and he didn't sugarcoat. After reviewing my documents, he confirmed what Priya had already told me. "You have a clean case for unauthorized credit activity," he said. "The signature discrepancy alone is enough to initiate a formal dispute. If the lender cooperates, and they usually do when fraud is documented, your name comes off the account entirely." "And my mother?" I asked. "She becomes solely liable for the full balance. And depending on the lender's response, they may refer the matter to law enforcement." I sat with that for a long time. The idea of my mother facing legal consequences made me feel sick in a way I hadn't expected. Not because she didn't deserve accountability, but because I could still hear her voice from when I was 8 years old, singing in the kitchen while she braided my hair before school. But I also remembered being 22, fresh out of college, sending my mother $3,000 when she said the mortgage was 2 months behind. I remembered being 25, putting a dental bill for Diego on my credit card, because my mother swore she would pay me back by the end of the month. She never did. I remembered being 28, handing my stepfather $1,200 for a roof repair he said was urgent, and later finding out the money went toward a down payment on Diego's Dodge Charger. I had been the emergency fund for a family that never treated me like a member. I filed the dispute on a Monday morning. 3 days later, my mother called. I let it ring. She called again. Then Diego called. Then my stepfather called from a number I didn't recognize. Then my mother texted, "Elena, something came from the bank. Please call me. I'm scared." I waited 2 hours, then called her back. She was crying before she finished saying hello. "They're saying the line of credit is under review. They're saying there's a fraud claim." "Elena, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "I corrected what you did." Silence. "You forged my signature on a loan document," I said. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" More silence. Then, quietly, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were going to pay it back before you ever knew." "Pay it back with what? My $800 a month?" She started sobbing. "I was trying to save the house. Your stepfather's business has been underwater for a year and a half. We were about to lose everything. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have asked me," I said. "You would have said no. And that would have been my right." She didn't have an answer for that because there wasn't one. When someone forges your name because they already know you'd refuse, they aren't asking for help. They're stealing your choice. That weekend, my stepfather drove to my apartment unannounced. I saw his truck through the window and almost didn't open the door. But something in me, maybe the last thread of obligation, maybe just exhaustion, made me turn the handle. He stood on the porch looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in but didn't offer coffee. He sat on the edge of my couch and told me the truth, or what I think was closer to it than anything my mother had offered. His contracting company had been losing clients for 18 months. He had taken on debt to cover payroll, then more debt to cover that debt. My mother had refinanced the house once already. When the bank offered a HELOC, they needed a co-borrower with better credit to qualify. "Your mother said she'd handle it," he said. "She said you'd understand. She said I'd understand having my identity used without my consent." He rubbed his face. "I know how it sounds. It sounds like fraud because it is fraud. Elena, if this goes through, we lose the house. Your mother loses the house. Diego has nowhere to go." Diego is 26 years old with a full-time job and a car that was partially paid for with money I thought was fixing a roof. Diego will survive. He flinched. "I need you to understand something," I said. "For 10 years, I have been the person this family calls when the math doesn't work. And every single time, I helped. Every single time, no one said thank you. And now you've moved past asking and started forging. So no, I'm not withdrawing the dispute. And I'm not funding the repayment of a loan I didn't take." He left without another word. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation escalated exactly the way Daniel Okafor said it would. The lender froze the HELOC pending investigation. My mother was asked to provide documentation proving I had authorized the loan. She couldn't, because I hadn't. The lender formally removed my name from the account and reclassified the balance as solely my mother's obligation. The full remaining balance, $36,400, landed on my mother and stepfather alone. That same week, Diego called me for the first time in months. Not to apologize, to yell. "You know Mom can't pay that back on her own," he said. "You're going to let them lose the house over paperwork?" "Over paperwork?" I repeated. "She forged my signature, Diego. She put me on a $40,000 loan without telling me. She was desperate, and I was convenient. There's a difference." "You're being cold." "No, I'm being accurate." "And while we're being accurate, how much rent do you pay to live in that house?" He hung up. 2 days later, my mother sent a long email. It was 7 paragraphs of history, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and everything she had done to raise me as a single mother before she married my stepfather. It ended with this line: "I gave you everything I had. All I asked was for you to give something back." I read it twice. Then I wrote back 3 sentences. "You gave me a childhood I'm grateful for. You also forged my name and put me in debt without my knowledge. Those 2 things are both true, and the second one doesn't get erased by the first." She didn't reply. A month later, the house went into default. Not because of me, because my stepfather had been skipping payments for months before the HELOC was even frozen. The fraud dispute accelerated the timeline, but the collapse had been in motion long before I opened that manila envelope on Thanksgiving morning. They had been drowning, and instead of telling me the truth, they had decided to forge my name and dress the whole thing up as a family duty. When the notice came, my mother called me sobbing at 6 in the morning. "Please," she said, "I know I was wrong, but please don't let us lose the house." I sat on the edge of my bed and closed my eyes. I thought about the woman who braided my hair. I thought about the woman who forged my name. They were the same person. That was the hardest part. "I'll help you find a housing attorney who handles foreclosure defense," I said. "I'll help you understand the timeline and the options. But I am not paying the balance. And I am not co-signing anything." "That's not enough," she whispered. "It's more than you gave me when you signed my name without asking." I followed through. I found them an attorney. I organized their paperwork into a timeline the attorney could use. I drove my mother to 2 appointments and sat in the waiting room while she cried through both of them. I did not pay a single dollar toward the debt. Diego never thanked me. My stepfather never apologized. My mother apologized once, then followed it with, "But you have to understand why I did it," which is not actually an apology. The house sold in a short sale 4 months later. My mother and stepfather moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the other side of town. Diego got his own apartment for the first time in his life. He complained about it constantly. After the dust settled, my mother started telling relatives that I had abandoned the family during a crisis, that I had the means to help and chose revenge instead. My aunt called me and said, "Your mother says you let them lose the house." I didn't argue. I sent my aunt 3 things: a copy of the HELOC application with the forged signature circled, a side-by-side comparison with my actual signature from my lease, and a single line that read, "I didn't let them lose the house. I refused to pay for a loan someone took out in my name without my permission." My aunt called back 20 minutes later and said, "Oh, Elena, I didn't know." Nobody had known. That was the point. My mother had controlled the story for so long that the truth felt like a plot twist to everyone who heard it. Over the following weeks, the real story spread on its own. I didn't post anything. I didn't make a public statement. I just answered honestly when people asked, and I showed the documents when people doubted. My stepfather lost 2 subcontracting partnerships because the partners didn't want to be associated with someone whose finances had unraveled that publicly. My mother quietly stopped attending her church small group after someone brought up financial integrity during a discussion. Diego blocked me on everything, which I considered the most honest thing he had ever done. 3 months after the house sold, my mother came to my apartment. She looked thinner and tired in a way I recognized because I had looked like that during my divorce. She stood in my doorway holding a small potted plant and said, "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to see you." I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table and drank coffee and didn't talk about money or houses or contracts. She told me about a book she was reading. I told her about a project at work. For 20 minutes, we were just a mother and daughter sitting together. Then she asked, "Do you think we'll ever be okay?" I told her the truth. "I don't know. But I know we won't be okay if you keep treating what happened like a misunderstanding instead of what it was." She looked down at her coffee. "It was wrong," she said quietly. "I know it was wrong. Then stop telling people I abandoned you." Her eyes filled. She nodded once. Whether she meant it or not, I don't know. I've learned that love and accountability don't always live in the same room, but you can't have one without the other if you want it to mean anything. She left that afternoon, and I stood at the window watching her walk to her car. She looked smaller from above. Everyone does when you finally stop kneeling. Here's what this story taught me. The people who raise you don't automatically earn the right to ruin you. Gratitude is real, but it has limits. And those limits exist at the exact point where someone decides your identity is a resource they can borrow without asking. For years, I believed that being a good daughter meant absorbing every crisis, covering every shortfall, and swallowing every insult so the family portrait could stay intact. But a portrait isn't a family. It's just a picture of people standing close enough to look connected. I didn't destroy my mother. I didn't burn down the relationship for sport. I protected my name because it was mine. I refused to fund a debt I never chose, because consent matters even between parents and children. And when the consequences arrived, I didn't stand in their way, because those consequences belong to the people who earned them. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for the people you love is let them feel the weight of what they've done. Not to punish them, but because pretending it didn't happen is just another kind of lie, and you've already carried enough of those. So tell me, if the person who gave you life tried to use your name to save their own, would you forgive them and foot the bill? Or would you protect yourself and let the truth settle where it falls? But protecting your future is not betrayal. Refusing to be collateral for someone else's choices is not cruelty. And sometimes the hardest boundary you'll ever set is the one between the parent you love and the fraud they committed. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, tap like so it reaches someone who needs to hear it.